Welcome to the channel, guys. My name is Jess. So Bitcoin has finally broken out of the 2025 downtrend, but with the price consistently rejecting off the 50 EMA on the daily time frame, are we really going to see the post-breakout rally that we've all been waiting for? Let's dive into the video today to talk about the recent price action across all the charts, including new developments on the short time frame and what they tell us about the future for Bitcoin. As always, before we jump in, make sure you guys smash that like button and subscribe to the channel to get regular Bitcoin analysis every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. And sign up to my free Telegram for more regular updates. If you're a trader and you're interested in my VIP channel, be sure to message me down below on Telegram. VIP gives you exclusive access to my personal trading setups with exact entry points, targets, and stop losses. Alright guys, so diving into the charts, let's talk about the 2025 downtrend that Bitcoin has just broken out of. So, I mean, as you guys can probably infer from the name, and if you guys have been watching my videos for a while, you know exactly what I'm talking about. But across the entirety of 2025, starting from the middle of January here, Bitcoin has been in a very aggressive downtrend, right? We can see consistent lower highs on the price action, consistent rejections from that trend line until very recently. So I wouldn't really call this a particularly strong breakout. If we take a look at the price action moving towards the trend line over here, we can see that, you know, we've just been able to sideways chop our way out of the trend line, but it is nevertheless a really good sign that we didn't approach that trend line and see immediate rejections the same way that we have consistently in the past, right? Look at that really aggressive candle over there with really long wicks to the upside and aggressive rejections again and again. So that was, of course, a great sign. But once again, if we take a look at the price action and the way it's reacting to that level of resistance, we can see that even though we've broken out of the structural trend line over here, the black line, we're still currently rejecting off the 50 EMA, the blue squiggly line drawn in over here through the market cipher A. And so that has consistently acted as a level of dynamic resistance as well, particularly throughout the last couple of months. From February onwards, we can see this first rejection over here after we flipped below the 50 EMA, and ever since that sort of February period, we haven't been able to flip back above the 50 EMA since then. So the last 50 days of price action has been more bearish than the moving average of the 50 days before that, right? That's essentially what that moving average tells us. And it's sort of a big sign of, I guess, momentum as well, because if we're seeing more aggressive bearish price action in this day, as opposed to the last 50 days, we're seeing more aggressive bearish momentum, right? And so that is currently on the daily chart our key level of resistance, and one of the key factors preventing Bitcoin from having that really explosive post-breakout rally that we were sort of expecting moving into the 2025 downtrend. Now, one last thing that's really important to note here on the daily chart before we move into the short time frame and talk about the structural developments we're having moving towards that level of resistance is if we take a look at where the 50 and 200 EMA are sort of placed, right? The red squiggly line and the blue line. In my last video, someone commented that the red was the 50 and the blue was the 200. And then you confused me, but it's actually the other way around. On my particular inputs, if we just take a look at the market cipher A here, the EMA 8 is the red one, that's 200, right? And then the blue one is the 50. And what we can see here over the last 3 days of price action is that the 50 and 200 EMA are beginning to converge. Now that is pretty important because historically on the daily time frame here, when we see the 50 and 200 EMA sort of converge and we begin to test those levels as either support and resistance, we generally see a really big flip in the charts. Now let me take you guys back to a couple examples. So over here, right, we had one of the most high time frame sort of cases of consolidation over here. If you guys were a part of that price action from March all the way till October, potentially even sort of a little bit after that, the end of October, we were in a really long period of sideways chop consolidation. We had a bull flag pattern over here. We had some really sort of bearish scenarios happen, some really huge mass liquidation days, and it was just a crazy time in the market. But what we can see is after we saw these really big wicks to the downside and those liquidation events, we had the 200 EMA and the 50 EMA converging over here. And it was the flip of both those levels of support that facilitated a really high time frame period of rallying for Bitcoin. And that's where we finally broke out of this channel of consolidation and moved up to $106,000. And another example, if we go just a little bit further back, It's very close to the start of the bull market. Over here, we saw a convergence of the 50 and the 200 EMA, right, at $26,000. And we rallied all the way up to break past the dead cat bounce level of resistance. I think that was around $43,000, right? And that was, again, a really, really huge rally. And that rally continued to take us all the way up to that next high time phase of accumulation and sort of rallying, right, this horizontal channel. So again, it sort of marks out that Bitcoin is really approaching quite a crucial point in its price action, where if we are able to flip this, there is a chance that it could lead to high time frame reversals here, right? And move back up to not just, 85,000 to retest the prior high and that sort of stuff, but potentially even to retest the other prior highs at 95,000, 105,000, and potentially, as a stretch, 110 as well, right? So putting into mind how important the price action is right now on the daily time frame, let's zoom into the short time frames and talk about how the price action is reacting to those levels of resistance. So on the short time frame, on the 4-hour chart here, we can see that over the last couple of days, I would say maybe even a week now, Bitcoin has been traveling sideways in a really, really small range, right? We have our short time frame support here at $83,000. We can see 3 retests of that level of support, and we have our short time frame resistance at $86,000. Now at face value, it doesn't really look like anything's changed, right? On the short time frame, it's been really, really boring price action, particularly when we're moving into, public holidays. We have the Easter long holiday right now. And so, overall volume, overall everything is just really, really low. But we have seen some very subtle shifts in the short time frame price action over the last 2-ish days. So first of all, over here on the 4-hour chart, we had a downtrend on the price action, on the RSI moving throughout this channel, right? So that was the bearish divergence that we had over here. We had high highs on the price action against this level of resistance, but unfortunately momentum was dropping. Now, despite that drop in momentum and the massive increase in selling pressure over here, what we had here was an instance of bullish divergence against support. So at $83,000, we saw a massive increase in strength from the buyers here defending this level of support. Now, since then, we have gone on to break out of this RSI downtrend, showing us that short time frame momentum has flipped bullish since these sort of 2 retests of support and resistance. And if we zoom in just a little bit further into the hourly chart, we can actually see a short time frame uptrend and structure developing here. So this is a bullish structure. It's an ascending triangle, and it might just be what leads Bitcoin to break out of the 50 EMA on the daily time frame. So here, ascending triangle structures essentially map out, consistent accumulation behavior and higher highs against a sell wall, a horizontal level of resistance. Now that is pretty clear. We have 3 retests of that resistance at 85,000. Even though this isn't like a perfect contact point there, we can still see a very clear horizontal base of resistance, right? And as we see continual retests of that level of resistance with increasing accumulation behavior, at some point that sell wall is going to be absorbed and therefore leading to the breakout. Now that's why ascending triangle structures are generally bullish, and they're generally higher confidence structures than ascending wedges, for example. And so what we're really looking for here on the short time frame then is a breakout of this bullish structure, and that's going to be an hourly candle close above this level of resistance with buy side liquidity right here at 85.5 thousand, this wick high. And then, of course, we want to be able to then move into this liquidity range of resistance, right? We can see it pulled up on the Smart Money Concepts indicator. That's this big red triangle over here, ending at $86,000, moving into this liquidity zone, right? And so what would be most ideal here is a breakout, candle close above buy side liquidity, 85.5, retest, change of character, support, and then a move into and a breakout from that sort of liquidity zone. And the measured move of this triangle takes us right up to the next level of high time frame resistance on the daily time frame at $88,000. That is our first change of character level on these high time frame charts. Now, before we dive into the bullish case scenario and talk about that level of resistance at 88 and what that would mean and, potentially how far this rally could go, let's really quickly stay on the short time frame and talk about what's going to invalidate this analysis. So just like any other structure that we have on the short time frame, they can be invalidated, right? We can see shifts in the price action and new developments happening. So on this hourly chart, if Bitcoin, instead of breaking out of this horizontal resistance, we end up losing the accumulation behavior we're seeing here and we fall below our trend line, what's essentially going to happen here is, of course, an invalidation of our ascending triangle structure. Now, even if Bitcoin does that, what we still have, of course, is the horizontal range here on the short time frame. And essentially, while we hold 83k support over here, the overall price action is still going to be relatively neutral. We're not seeing anything that's going to warn us for a drop yet, even if we lose that short time frame structure, right? It's really the loss of $83,000 that's going to signal for the next move downwards and the rejection from that 50 EMA on the daily time frame, right? And so a drop below 83,000 will likely send Bitcoin back down to this historical level of support down here at $81,000. We can see we have a little gap in the volume profile as well. And then below that, we have these other historical levels of significance, right? We have this prior low here at 78,000 and then 75, and of course, the range low at $74,500. And so while this bearish price action on the short time frame is definitely possible, just like, most things are, what we're essentially saying here with our analysis on the short time frame charts and with that ascending triangle structure is that that is the less likely scenario. We are more likely to see a break above $86,000 as per the recent developments on the short time frame, as opposed to the short time frame bearish case scenario. So let's go ahead then and talk about where this rally could take us. So if Bitcoin manages to actually push above the 50 and 200 EMA here and we flip both of those dynamic levels of resistance to support, the first move that we're expecting is the measured move of that ascending triangle structure and a move to the first level of high time frame resistance that we have here at $88,000, right? We can see those 2 wicks here marking out that level of resistance. And again, if we pull up the Smart Money Concepts indicator, you can see the way that it maps out these prior high retests of our 2025 downtrend as resistance. And so moving back upwards and actually experiencing the rally and breakout that we expected after pushing above the 2025 downtrend, these are sort of our targets moving back upwards. First of all, being 88,000. Now, that is probably one of the most crucial levels of resistance we have following the 50 and 200 EMA here, because it is the first change of character level, right? And the first prior high in that downtrend. And when I say change of character, I mean, for example, we have a downtrend. Sorry, I feel like I explain this every single video. I'm so sorry if anyone watches this and like, oh my God, Jess, we get it. But just in case, one last time. When we flip above change of character levels, right, the prior high horizontal resistances in a prior downtrend, what we're essentially doing is re-establishing an uptrend. We're reclaiming prior levels of resistance as support, and we flip the nature of the charts. It's a change of character, right? So flipping above $88,000, we then have the next high time frame target here at 99,000, right? We can see the end of that sort of gap in the volume profile here, or a dip in the volume profile, and then of course above that we have 105,000, this next liquidity zone, and then of course $110,000, the absolute range high for this sort of price action over here, right? But that kind of puts into the question, how far will this rally actually go, right? Because just because we've seen a breakout of these levels, that doesn't necessarily confirm that we're going to be moving all the way up to 95, 99, 105, and 110. So what's really going to signal a high time frame breakout? That's going to be what we're seeing on the weekly time frame. So tomorrow we have the weekly candle close for Bitcoin. That's for those of us in Australia on Monday morning at 10 a.m. And that weekly candle close is going to be a pretty important one, because if we take a look at the price action over here, what we're essentially seeing is Bitcoin has started to retest once again the top of our current weekly range, and that is at $85,900, right? So once again, if we break above 86k, that level of resistance on the short time frame, and we push above the horizontal resistance in that ascending triangle structure, that's going to be a breakout on the weekly time frame as well. All those levels sort of really coincide. And what we would also see then on the RSI is, after breaking out of our RSI downtrend over here, we would also be breaking above, very likely, the prior high in that RSI downtrend. Now that is super important, because that is the same sort of level we rejected off in last week's candle close. We rejected off the top of our weekly range, and before the weekly candle closed, we also saw RSI dip back below our 2025 downtrend, right? We can see just there at that candle close, RSI was actually below our downtrend. So this could, again, be a pretty important week. And if we manage to see that breakout, the flip here on the weekly charts, the really high time frame charts, could essentially signal the start of a high time frame period of reaccumulation for Bitcoin, right? So it would sort of make the probabilities of seeing a high time frame rally up to those larger levels, 95, 99, 105, much more likely, as opposed to if we saw the breakout on the daily time frame and then, you know, on the weekly chart, the close itself wasn't actually bullish enough. So that's what we're still kind of waiting for on the weekly chart. It's a flip of 49.91, that sort of horizontal level, 49.93, and a break above the top of our weekly range. Alrighty guys, that is a wrap on the analysis for today. Thank you for tuning in for another episode. If you enjoyed the video or you learned something, don't forget to smash that like button and subscribe to the channel to get regular Bitcoin analysis every Wednesday, Friday, and Sunday. And join my free Telegram for more regular Bitcoin updates. If you're interested in my VIP trading channel, don't forget to message me down below on Telegram. VIP gives you exclusive access to my personal trading setup, so the exact entry points, targets, and stop losses. Hope you guys have a great week, and I'll see you in the next one. Bye!